All right. So let's get into it. Something I wanted to talk about was this explosive meeting, I guess, between Elon and Rubio. And we had speculated in past podcasts that, maybe Elon's time in the Trump administration would be fairly limited because he's just so uh, out there and just, uh, you know, everybody seems to be getting kind of annoyed with him. But I do believe this might be the beginning of the end for Elon. He kind of got into it with Rubio in front of all the other agency heads. And Trump stayed basically neutral. He kind of watched them go at it, but eventually he did take Rubio's side. He said, Rubio's been doing a pretty good job. Rubio's very busy, and he wanted them to both get along. So he stayed neutral, but he did defend Rubio. So this is, I guess, Trump kind of reasserting himself a little, and which I like to see because I'm not really a fan of everything Elon's doing, and I'm no fan of Rubio's, but Elon has made me a fan of Rubio's. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, honestly, I couldn't have said it much better myself. Like, for the love of God, don't make me defend Marco Rubio. But, here I am about to, I don't have really a choice. I don't understand from the beginning, like, why is Elon Musk even there? Like, he has no real position within the government. Depending on who you ask. I mean, Trump did say in the State of the Union that he's the head of Doge, but then, like, for legal reasons, to kind of shield him from some of this blowback that might come back, they're like, oh, it's actually some random woman who you've never heard of, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
and this whole argument, if I'm not mistaken, it started because basically Marco Rubio is like, hey, I'm the Secretary of State. I run the State Department. You don't get to tell me how to run my department. All right, I'm the one that had to testify before Congress. And Elon Musk said like, "Hey, you're supposed to be slashing your flipping staff."
yeah,
And that's the
yeah.
whole argument. And got to be honest here, like you said, I'm kind of on Rubio's side a little bit, and it seemed like all the other cabinet people tended to agree like, yeah, like listen, we might like sort of be on your side like in terms of like Elon, like yeah, we want to reduce fraud, waste, abuse, whatever their phrase is, right? But like ultimately at the end of the day, like this is our agency, you know?
Oh yeah.
Like
And and these people, they didn't get there the easy way like Elon did, where Elon's just a special government employee, and yet he has just in like this insane unchecked power. They had to go through Senate confirmations, so they fought for this spot, and I imagine there's a lot of resentment building up amongst them. I can't imagine very many people are a big fan of his. He's certainly seems to be rubbing other people the wrong way, and it just makes me think about Trump's first term. We back when Bannon was kind of like the Elon, court philosopher, I don't know, figure, I don't know what you would call it, but he was an advisor to Trump, and well, after 7 months or so, he eventually butted heads with enough people that Trump just got rid of him. And to me, I will honestly be a little surprised if Elon makes it 7 months, because we are, 2 months in, and it's, oh my gosh, finally, there's been some pushback from Trump, but
yeah. And how far did Bannon make it? Did he make it 9 months? Is like he was fairly quick, wasn't he?
nope, just seven. Just seven. I
Just
looked it up
seven.
today because I was curious. I'm like, okay, Bannon, he's nowhere near as outrageous as Elon, outrageous as he may be sometimes. So for him to have made it only 7 months, I can't imagine Elon has seven in the tank. I mean, surely he will piss Trump off enough before then that he will get the boot. But maybe this is wish casting. I don't know. I'm kind of done with it.
Yeah, there's a couple of options I see here. I mean, this could go 50 different ways of sideways, I feel like. Like A, you could have like a scandal or a controversy that, must does that basically gets it to where like Trump's popular support diminishes, right? So like that
Oh
could
yeah.
happen and then Trump will inevitably make him the scapegoat. Or B, he does something that like messes with Trump's base, right? So
Oh yeah.
whether that's
Yeah.
and Steve Bannon actually pointed this. I actually, Steve Bannon, you can say what you want, say he's crazy, say he's a little out there, right? But he's not dumb, I don't think, and I think that he at least has like a good like set of political calculus. And he's like, listen, if you guys cut Medicaid, like, do you understand how much of MAGA is on Medicaid and Social Security and Medicare? He's like, it'd be the dumbest thing you could do. Like, red states and conservative people are the most likely to be taking welfare, and you're gonna take it away from them. He's like,
Yeah.
he's like, you idiots, and yeah, and the idea, and this is like, I guess to circle back to like Rubio, the idea that these federal secretaries have basically been, they, like you said, they went through Congress, they had to take the ass chewing in front of everybody, and then just for some 23-year-old coder to slash 3,000 members of their staff, or like
Yeah.
so, and that's as ridiculous as if some guy who has no idea about any of your work came into your work and decided, sorry, your job's no longer here. I've never met you. I mean, we're seeing a lot of this with the VA. I don't know if you've been following up on this, but like VA members have been like fired and like their boss didn't know, the owner of the hospital, or not the owner, the manager of the hospital didn't know.
So what do you do now?
So immediately following that, though, I called my immediate supervisor to let him know. I was like, hey, just letting you know, I know you're on vacation right now, but I just got fired. Immediately calls me back. He's like, what? Tell me, show me. And I called, next hire. Because again, like the Ann Arbor VA is an amazing place. We have great leadership. And like everybody was genuinely concerned and surprised because they're like, we had no idea.
Nobody in your direct chain of command knew you were being fired.
Nobody. The director of our hospital had no idea.
What does that tell you about the reasoning behind it?
It was arbitrary and it wasn't thought out and poorly executed. I think like it's become pretty obvious and how we've seen with other agencies and the people that were terminated, rehired, so terminated again.
Like no one in their direct chain of command knew that they were being fired, and this guy like still got fired. Like it's a pretty wild set of stories that's coming out. It's not like the idea that like these firings are taking place with like a deep level of thought is just not true. It's just arbitrary firing, you know?
Oh yeah. I really have just such hate for this, like, the Silicon Valley, like, philosophy of, like, move fast and break things. It's like we're talking about government, not some like stupid tech startup, like, uh we should within reason things should be, evaluated. And I don't know, but Trump did say, I believe it. Gosh, I don't. I think it was in a Truth Social post, but he said going forward they're going to use a scalpel, or he has advised Elon to use a scalpel rather than like an axe when tearing apart these agencies, or firing people, whatnot. So I think Trump has kind of learned his lesson that he needs to rein Elon in, and you know because I think there's enough pressure probably from within his administration to just get things under control. I can't imagine the people around him are loving Elon.
No, 100%. And I think another part of this too is that like Trump doesn't want to spend his political capital like having to defend Elon Musk. He wants to spend his political capital like passing legislation that's going to help his base before the midterms because he's trying not to lose Congress, you know?
Oh yeah.
The idea that like this is going to work out well for him. I mean, for God's sakes, there's a report that out of this cabinet meeting that, basically him and Rubio argued for like 15 or 20 minutes, just those two. And like if
Really?
you
It was at 15 to 20 on one?
yeah,
Holy crap.
so the entire cabinet's in there, and Rubio and them are talking, and basically Elon's like, "Well, you need to do better at cutting your staff," and he's like, "Well, 1,500 people took the buyout." He said, "Does that not count? Like, what if I rehired them and fired them?" And he's making, for the people who don't know, he's making a joke at the fact that Elon is having to fire people and then being like, "Oh, we can't fire these people. We need them." So he's having to rehire. So like if you don't know, like the nuclear like missile people, they got fired and they got rehired because the programmer didn't know.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
the people like the bird flu response team got fired because they're like, well, you're on probation. And it's like, yeah, we just started. Like, what do you mean? And I guess at some point, Sean Duffy, who's the transportation secretary, he joins in and he's like, well, like, I can 100% tell you it's arbitrary because one of your guys tried to fire air traffic controllers. And Elon Musk was like, BS, give me names. Who was fired? Who did my people tell you to fire? And he's like, no one was fired because I told them no. And he's like, are you serious? Like, you're going to tell me that this didn't happen? Like, I oversaw the conversation. And it's like, he's like, dude, I have like a huge amount of plane crashes that are happening with right now. I'm already understaffed, and you want me to fire air traffic controllers? He said, "Are you mad?" Like, I don't get it. Like, what's the gain here, Darren? Like, help me out.
Oh, I don't know. I honestly, like, people have like been theorizing that there's some like sinister like, ploy at play or something, but I don't know. I think it's honestly just stupidity. Like, I really think it is just stupidity because I mean, I can kind of see like wanting to make government, weak so that you can further your own agenda, but I mean, to me, I don't think Trump is fully on board with that. So that conspiracy doesn't really make sense to me. And yeah, and people, say, well, Elon is like this, anarcho-capitalist. That might be so, but I don't know. I just really think it's stupidity. I don't know if there's any like 4D chess. I don't think there's any like 4D chess like grand vision going on. Uh I mean there is, a certain amount of self-dealing that's going on by Elon. That's obvious. But in terms of granting Tesla contracts and Starlink, getting contracts for, those businesses, I just think it's stupidity. And another thing that I had thought of, not to monopolize the conversation, but something before the election that I could that this all reminded me of. Richard Spencer, he made this argument that Biden and Kamala are kind of like the conservative options, and it at first it might not make sense because what, conservative, they're liberals, but they wouldn't do this. They wouldn't bring about radical change. They would just conservatively oversee the empire's decline. Like the empire's decline would not be accelerated in this fashion where we're just pissing off allies, we're making the government inefficient in an attempt to make it efficient. Uh, all this BS, it wouldn't be occurring had had Kamala won.
Yeah.
So
Well, and just to piggyback, sorry, off of what you said, like the idea that they're trying to create a more efficient government with all these firings, but like you said, there's a lot of like data coming out about this, specifically with the VA, that the firings, like there's no order to it. So like literally like people are showing up and they're like, "Hey, where's like Greg? He's supposed to be here today." And they're like, "Well, Greg got fired." And the boss is like, "What the hell?" So like that gap in administration is creating an inefficiency, right?
Hmm.
So it's actually like I would be shocked if at the end of the year if the deficit went down or I'm not convinced that with this savings in staff and with the savings and the cuts that they claim, which I don't know if you've looked into the cuts that they claim, it's mostly BS. Um,
That's what I've heard.
like they claimed for like ICE, they claimed that they saved the department $8 billion. And like just a quick Google search will tell you that their entire budget is $8 billion. So like, clearly that's not true. And then a further look, it's like, oh, it was actually 8 million. They just added three zeros because why not? But I mean, like you said, like this, goal to have a more efficient government is actually like the way they're going about it is radically deteriorating the government's ability to do anything at all. Like, which might also be the goal. I'm not entirely sure with this, tech-centered idea that they've got going on. But like you said, I mean, I can't help but feel like we're accelerating the decline. I mean, this is a government that's not even pretending to like legislate to fix problems. They're trying to get government out of fixing problems.
Oh yeah, I don't know. It's just infuriating all around the board. I mean, on one hand, I used to be a much bigger fan of Elon, and I definitely like that he purchased Twitter. I think Twitter is in a better place than where it was, in terms of, what my goals are. I mean, I think right now the current Twitter is better suited for helping me achieve those goals, and how I want society to look. But other than that, I'd prefer if just Elon left the public scene. I've grown very tired of him, but that's really all I have left to say on the on this matter.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll round off and then we can kind of move on a little bit, but I really don't get it. And like you said, I wonder if the American public is going to be dissatisfied with Elon or if they're going to have like a neutral view. Like maybe they're against Elon, but like they're still going to vote Republican in the midterms. Like, I mean, here's the deal. Like they've been interviewing some of these people and some of these people are like, they're like, yeah, I voted for Trump and I lost my job. But, there some of them are, rational enough to be like, okay, well, I'm gonna, vote Democrat. Like I obviously didn't vote for this. Like I work for the National Park Service. I didn't think that this is what they were gonna be cutting, right? And but then there's some people that are just, and they look about like how you'd imagine. They look a little, Republican and you know, and they're like, "Well, I'm still voting for him." And I'm like, "Okay, well, dig your own hole, I guess." It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I think Marco Rubio has, and again, don't make me defend Marco Rubio, but I think he at least understands like, hey, like when we're in government, like our position should be how are we going to wield power in a way that furthers our interest, Like, and you're kind of taking my ability to do that when you slash my staff without telling me. So like, please don't do that. That's all pretty much he said. Like he was like,
Hmm.
yeah, just let me do my job. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and I so feel bad because Marco Rubio built up his entire career for this job, and he has to do it in this administration. He's like, oh God, he's like, I'm going to hell. I'm going this.
Yeah, imagine like spending so many decades like just grinding, just so you can get further up on the political ladder, only for you to be like, only for this like autistic guy to be totally in charge of you, and he doesn't even wear a suit. He just, wears a shirt around and
Yeah, this ketamine addict is running around telling like grown adults how to do their job. I mean, this is no different than if some total stranger off the street came to your job and was like, "Hey, here's how you need to do this. Here's how you need to do this." And it's like you can tell within the first 5 minutes this person has no idea how to do anything. Like they have no idea what they're talking about. And that's pretty obvious. Like when you hear Elon talk about pretty much anything related to the government, it's very clear he has no idea what he's talking about, for goodness sake. And that's like you said, that's not malice, that's stupidity.
oh yeah, I really do. I just, like I said, I just people have these bizarre, or well, not bizarre, but they have these elaborate conspiracy theories about what his ulterior motives might be. I'm like, I just think he's not as smart as we might think he, or at least not as competent, perhaps. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so segueing into the next news story we wanted to cover. Darren, have you seen any of this Mahmoud Khalil story at all?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've seen it. Do you want me to
No,
give
no, I
the
gotcha.
summary? Oh, okay.
So essentially, the story is this. So essentially, we've got a pro-Palestinian activist who is an immigrant who was here on a student visa at the Columbia University, which is an Ivy League that just lost their federal funding, right? Like they just lost their, however many $100 million gift from the government. And this guy, Mahmoud Khalil, gets detained by ICE, right? And they tell him, they're screaming at him. They're telling him, "Hey, you lost your student visa. You lost your student visa. We revoked it." And he's like telling them like, "No, I'm a green card holder. I'm here legally. Like I haven't committed a crime. Like no one's revoked my green card." They arrest him anyways. And then they transfer him to a processing center in Louisiana. And which is really weird because they have processing centers in New York. Like and then like a little bit more digging goes into this and it's like, okay, why? Like this guy wasn't doing anything. He was just kind of there. And it turns out that this guy was a pretty big pro-Palestinian activist and he led a bunch of the demonstrations and a bunch of the like the altercations that they had with police at Columbia University. And then Trump weighs in on this. He truthed. Um, Basically, he just hailed the arrest and said it was the best thing ever. And then he promised that more student arrests are coming. So, total, but nobody is defending this on the right to freedom of speech, even though this guy is a legal immigrant and a green card holder. Apparently, the U.S. Constitution doesn't apply to him. So,
Oh yeah, it's terrible. And it just shows that, our government will do anything for Israel, but if this guy were out there, burning an American flag or any other flag for that matter and stomping on it and just being generally disrespectful, nothing would have happened to him. you know they wouldn't have gone after them, but because he's anti-Israel, that's what happens to you in this country. That's what really matters. And it's just so brazen. Uh I really just can't even believe it's happening because not only is he a green card holder, he's married to a US citizen.
right.
So I mean,
Who,
he has a
by the way, is 8 months pregnant, like
yes, yes.
with his kid. So imagine that.
Oh yeah, and so they disappear this guy basically because they send him all the way across the country, and his wife has no idea how to get contact him, and oh my gosh, it is just so brazen, and it's such an assault on the free speech that you know uh all the I hate to say it, but all these conservatives they pretend to care about, I guess, but except when it comes to this one topic, you cannot go against Israel in this country, or they'll or you'll face the consequences. But this has been the trend ever since October 7th. Just take Claudine Gay, president of Harvard. The well, former president of Harvard, along with a few others. I believe. Yeah, there were a few. I think two other Ivy League schools. Their president also had to step down because they were not forceful enough in their condemnation of the protesters at their schools. And it is just remarkable. It is just remarkable.
Yeah, well, let's if you don't mind, let's leave the free speech aside for just a second because I want to get to that, but I think that's going to take a huge bulk of our conversation. Um, but let me just first like talk about like this is a clear violation of rights. And to the audience who may not know that you're like, oh, it's an immigrant. Immigrants probably have a higher degree of rights than you're probably thinking. So if you're a regular undocumented immigrant, ICE can just get you and get you out, basically. But if you're a green card holder or if you're a student visa holder, then you have closer rights to an American citizen. Like, for example, if you're a green card holder, they can't just revoke that. ICE can't do that. A judge has to do that. And the Department of Homeland Security has to give you a 30-day notice that they're going to even just, dispute the fact that you should have a green card. So like they're going to give you, which they did not do. I want to be very clear. They did not do to Mahmoud Khalil. They just revoked his student visa, but they didn't revoke his green card. And so this dude never went before a judge. A judge never ruled. And let's be real, the only reason that this happened, he didn't lie on his application. He didn't convict crime, right? Like the only thing this dude is guilty of is speaking bad about the wrong country, and the country that he was speaking bad about wasn't even America. Like
Yeah.
this doesn't make any sense. I mean, I want you to imagine a world where, there's a conservative protest against George Floyd, and they're literally like sending these people to detention centers halfway across the country. The fucking right would go absurd. Like
Yeah.
none of this makes any sense. And like clearly this is one of those things that like they're just hoping that this kid doesn't have a good lawyer, which they're wrong. And like this guy's going to get out of this, but at the end of the day, this is like just a big threat for people to like, all right, sit down, shut up, or we're going to throw you in a cage until you come away saying the right things. And that's disgusting.
Oh yeah, it's a massive deterrent, and even the ADL praised this action. Believe it or believe it or not, the ADL praised it.
God, and when have they ever been wrong, Darren?
Oh, exactly. Well, they're against defamation, of
They're
course,
yeah.
but I mean, they used those exact words. They were like, we hope this will be a deterrent threat, that this prevents any further action from happening. They want Jewish students to, feel quote unquote safe, on campus. Uh,
Which
it's
is that specific point is hilarious because who came out and defended Mahmoud was a Jewish organization within the community of Columbia. So like the idea that like young Jewish students are like threatened at the universities, half the time they're the ones holding the demonstrations in support of Palestine. Like,
oh yeah. There's a significant. I have noticed that there actually is a significant Jewish contingent of these pro-Palestine demonstrations. Whenever they crop up, there's always at least they seem relatively visible. So
Absolutely. Um, but I guess now to the free speech aspect of this, but I just wanted to be like totally transparent with the audience that like nothing that happened is legal. They did not go through this wasn't like, oh, this is literally they just didn't like what he said, so they locked him up in a cage, flew him halfway across the strait or the states, and they're trying to find a way to mess around the system and get him kicked out of the country. And the guy didn't commit a single crime. He came here legally. He applied through the process. He's here on a residency visa, a permanent. That people don't realize a green card is not. That's not the name. That's the freaking alias. It's called a permanent residency card. Like this guy is here. He's able to work. He has a master's degree from Columbia University, and people are acting like he's some sort of criminal. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh yeah, it is. It is just so beyond the pale. But you wanted to get into the more free speech portion of it, where
Yeah, because I figured we could, talk about, more free speech in general too if we needed to. But um, yeah, I have a huge problem with the United States government deciding that they're gonna arbitrarily deport migrants based on what they say on a public university campus, on what demonstrations they at that point, why do we even have a First Amendment? If we're saying that we're gonna kick you out of the country because you partook in a protest, right? The protest could say anything as far as I'm concerned.
oh
Like
yeah, oh yeah,
it doesn't make any sense. Like it's not like the dude was out there advocating like for Hamas to overthrow Israel, right? Like he was just, arguing that the US shouldn't finance this war. Israel should stop the occupation. Like, pretty basic stuff. I mean, this guy's got Palestinian heritage. Like he's got skin in this game.
oh
And
yeah,
he wasn't committing major acts of violence. He wasn't, doing anything like super, super crazy. And the government just decided, nope, that's it. We're going to throw you away, lock you in a cage, far away from your pregnant wife where she can't visit you. And I'm like, okay, this is. And people will defend this. Like
oh
supposed
yeah,
free speech warriors will defend this. It doesn't make any sense.
oh yeah. And this is where the ADL will, organizations like the ADL and then sympathizers, they will, like you were saying, he was not advocating for people to go commit acts of terror or anything, but they will stretch the definition of that so far. They will say, well, if you're saying from the river to the sea, Palestine ought to be free, well, then that kind of insinuates that you want to eradicate Jews from that area. Therefore, you must be advocating for some form of terrorism to get them out of there. And therefore, if you chant that, you are inciting violence against Jewish people. And so, but oh my gosh, it's so stupid. And it really makes me just so mad that Trump is going along with this. This was one of my fears going on, going into this, going into this recent election, and I will say it was kind of a tempered fear. I thought, well, surely he's not going to do like this Project Esther type stuff where they crack down on like anti-Semitic quote unquote speech and like you know basically jail people for stuff like this or uh, but I really didn't think he would go there, but lo and behold, here we are. So just every bad part like of what could happen is it's all slowly coming to fruition. Like every fear of mine of what a second Trump term might look like, it's coming to pass. So Fingers crossed we don't go to war with Iran, because that was also my fear. But we'll see. There's still a lot of time.
Dude, no kidding. I mean, the Trump administration is at the point where Nick Fuentes is like, all right, guys, you went a little too far to the right for me. Like, you gotta calm it down over there. You know what I mean? Like, this is not, and like when you're losing Nick Fuentes, that kind of gives me a little bit of hope. That gives me a little bit of hope. And I tell you what, the only thing that's missing here is the Democrats have no like opposition to this that's organized. I mean, like Hakeem Jeffries, his only opposition is like, well, we're gonna call him the, President Chaos. And I'm like, dude, you're so cringy. There has to be some sort of are you familiar with the Tea Party movement, Darren?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Back in the
Yeah. So, for the audience who doesn't know, the Tea Party movement was basically after Obama won, the Republicans, after firmly getting their asses handed to them, they decided, all right, we got to change the way we do politics in a drastic way. So, we have to go further to the right. We have to talk about culture war issues. We got to talk about this, this, and this, and this. And it basically reshaped the Bush era to what is now MAGA, right? And it was a rather quick process. I'm not going to lie to you. They basically did it from 2008 to 2010. So, I mean that's a fast turnaround. Um, and the left needs something like that. Um, they don't really have a choice. I mean, it's either that or they're just going to die as a party because this party is just plain defeated, and it's not just the politicians. The voters are defeated. Like the approval of the Democratic Party among Democrats is like down to like almost 50%, which is unbelievably low. Like
Oh yeah,
um
well, I have a hunch that the reason we're not seeing a whole host of more left wing elected officials coming out against this, even though it would be such an easy score, is because they basically support it. Maybe they're not going to be as explicit about it, but and if they were if they were president, I don't think they would do it because I don't want to alienate their base. But I don't, I don't think many of them have a real problem with it, and that's part
yeah.
of the problem.
Well, I do agree with you there. That the idea, I mean, listen, Democrats take, a significant amount of money from APAC too, man. And that at the end of the day, like these politicians, they're not, held to the standards of their constituents. They're held to the standard of their lobbyists. And unfortunately for the American public, the Israeli lobby is undeniably one of the most influential ones across both parties. Like there is no like way to fight this. And part of the reason there's no way to fight that is because there's no counter to the Israel lobby. So like with fossil fuels, like you have like the green energy people, right? And you have all that. But like with APAC, like what are you supposed to be? You supposed to be pro Iran? like so that's why it's so hard. Unless you just want to totally detach yourself from them as an ally, which I honestly don't think is as popular. Maybe people don't want to fund this war, Darren, but I would be shocked if public support would say like, no, like we need to stop being allies with Israel, or we need to stop funding Israel, you know?
I would be shocked as well. I think the American public is still largely in favor of Israel, especially those who vote. So the older generations. But
Now, I will say, and not to cut you off, but I did see a Gallup poll, and they do this, every year, um, that approval for Israel and their actions, like against Palestine, among Democrats, like it's about to flip. Like it's still a majority support Israel, but like you can see like a very clear like, they're about to cross and Palestine's about to be, which makes sense if you consider, where the Democrats have gone like demographically.
oh
Like
yeah,
they're
yeah.
just more of like a melting pot party.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, as Well, as the Democratic Party becomes less white, less evangelical, inevitably uh it'll inevitably be less pro-Israel because, it's really that evangelical heartland contingent that really supports Israel, and that's their strong, base of support in America. And I predict that the Israel the Israel lobby will definitely make a. It already has. It already has, but I think it'll continue to make a more of a rightward push because that's really the only place where they're going to get any support.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like before like October 7th, they kind of enjoyed the benefit of having like basically like a hand in both decks, you know?
Oh yeah. Oh
Like
yeah.
um for sure. But
October 7th has changed the paradigm forever. I mean, you're seeing totally normal people who never had thought about this issue before. Just they they see it now. They see
yeah.
the money. They see the influence.
Yeah, people who before October 7th they couldn't point to Israel on a map can now give you like pretty detailed videos about like look, like they're shooting kids in the head like twice. They're they're bombing an entire strip of land that keeps getting smaller and smaller. Like it's undeniable at this point. And I shouldn't say undeniable. People still, deny it, but um only they can only do that with the evidence right in front of their face, like is what it
Yeah,
is.
yeah. I feel like for most people, still in support of Israel. I think it's really hard for anyone who's like really plugged in to still be in support of it. They definitely exist, and they have their justifications, and some justifications are more, I guess, respectable than others. But I think for most people who are fully aware of what's going on, it's you know I think they come on to the side more so of Palestine. Uh, yeah, I know very few that you know, knowing fully what's going on, have chosen to side with Israel. But that is part of the problem, though. Most of America is relatively insulated from the subject. Even like the story that we started off on, this Mahmoud Khalil guy. I mean, I had heard about it through Twitter, and then I'm like, okay, I'll read up on it because I want to discuss it in the podcast. Well, I actually had to do quite a bit of digging in the New York Times to find it. I assumed that, hey, maybe it would be in the front page. This seems like a really big deal, but because this is kind of, in some ways, it should be right up Democrats' alley, because, well, it's total executive branch overreach, like, undeniably. But no, I had to do quite a bit of searching for it before I found it. So
Well, to be fair, that could just be a symptom of this presidency. That may not just necessarily be on the New York Times. I
you
mean,
might,
this
yeah, you might be right.
like
There's so much going on.
I'm not gonna hold their feet to the fire too much, to be completely honest with you there. But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, just to like refresh the audience here, like, is there any Biden era like move that infringes on free speech in any such way? Like, can you think of anything? And I know I've got you off the cuff here, but like, I don't know, because we're talking about like legitimate government jailing people for speech.
Yeah,
Like,
nothing of this caliber. There was nothing of this caliber. There was like minor, very, compared to this, very minor. It felt very major at the time, but where the Biden administration would kind of collaborate with social media to maybe shadow ban right wingers to an extent, but uh, that's nothing compared to this. I mean,
To locking a person in prison and trying to kick them out of the country. Yeah,
oh yeah,
you
this is
bet your
just a
ass it's not the
whole.
same. Like that'd be like if they locked up Alex Jones and they just were trying to find a country to send him to. Like it doesn't none of this makes any sense.
Oh yeah, this is just a whole other step, and I mean, well, like I said earlier, it's just it was one of my fears of what might happen. If Trump, me, I voted for neither, but it, yeah, this was one of the fears going in, and I'm really sad to see it coming about because I really thought it was a low chance that this might happen, but yeah, nope, it's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is happening. And like I said, Trump promised like this is going to happen more and more. This was a campaign promise too. Like I don't think a lot of people, and I'll grant people, it's a minor campaign promise. Like it's not like something he televised a
Oh
lot.
yeah, compared to the others,
Um,
this was a very minor.
but he basically, and I only say that because like most of the viewers out there are going to be like low to medium engaged voters, so they're not watching CNN or Fox News every night. They're not reading the New York Times. They're not surfing through the news on YouTube. Like they're just you know they see it at random times and they're lucky to get whatever headline they get. Um, you know, and that's totally fine. Like
Oh yeah,
I'm
yeah. I mean,
unfortunately, that's about 80% of our base or of our uh, voter base in America because who has the time, you know? Who has the time to dedicate to like being informed on everything?
oh yeah, it would be impossible. I mean, I think most people can probably only fit in enough time for few headlines a week, in order, and then reading about them. So,
Right. But I guess what I'm saying is that like listen, like he promised to do this like more. Like you're going to see more of this. And the conservatives have to decide whether they're going to support the federal government cracking down on speech to the point of jailing people for months and then eventually kicking them out of the country. Like they're going to have to decide if they're okay with that. Um I mean and not just that, they're going to transfer you to a judge that they prefer. So, like, the reason this dude got transferred from New York to Louisiana is because the judge in Louisiana is a Trump appointed immigration judge. So, the judge is likely to rule, like, get him out of here?
hmm
And you're going to see stuff like that happen who knows how many times. And these Ivy League schools where all these protests went on, it's a pretty decent chunk that is from a foreign country here on a student visa, and then now they're a green card holder. Like it's not really that uncommon.
oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, especially with these, huge, really big schools. I mean, there's just tons of foreign nationals that come over to study. So yeah, there's no telling, and it's such a step above because around October 7th when all these protests just started, you know, initially these students were getting doxxed, by like people like Bill Ackman and stuff. They had those dox vans, just crazy displays, and then they were like blacklisted from like certain industries like law firms and even like Wall Street.
Well,
You know,
even not just that. I mean, there were entire police departments that were like their chief was put in place to start cracking skulls on university campuses. Like they were like
oh yeah, yeah,
riots at
yeah.
some of these places. Like they're trying to break some freaking heads out there.
Oh yeah, they want to physically punish. I mean, they did. I mean, I've
Yeah,
seen videos of. I believe it was like right before last summer. I want to say those protests really ramped up. They had I believe, some these protester students. They were they did some occupations of some university. I believe it was on the Columbia campus as well. They had some tents. They were occupying buildings, and eventually the police came and got pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
Much more so than you would think for a bunch of you know college students, and then I saw like their elderly professors there too. So
Yeah, no kidding. But um I guess, and I just wanted to segue to this about your position on free speech in general. Like how would you describe your position on free speech?
um right now I would prefer it to be as laissez-faire as possible. I'm pretty pro free speech. I'm a little open to ideas of like maybe, well, I won't even say that. Yeah, I would say I'm about as laissez-faire as it comes. I really don't want any restrictions, even though like if I saw like recently, there were like these Mexican immigrants and they were, protesting on highways and they were waving Mexican flags. Well, I'm sure at least some of them were probably illegal, but so there's that matter. But even if all of those people were in fact legal, I would accept. I'm obviously not a fan of that. I would accept it though. I do think there ought to be like, you know, norms that perhaps that I would really rather people don't cross, but once you start infringing upon it a little, that take an inch, give a mile. So I would prefer that the laws be as free as possible. How about you?
Yeah, I feel like from a legal perspective, I'm as about free speech absolutist as you could possibly be. So, in other words, you could say whatever you want. You can say so and so didn't happen, event in the 19 whatever. You could say that didn't happen. You can say the moon landing was fake. Like, I don't care. Like, that's Earth is flat, whatever. I don't care. You don't get to go to jail. Like, the government's not going to lock you up in a cage and move you halfway across the country. Um, the area that's gray for me is whenever you get into like private corporations, right? So, like
Yeah,
for
there is the
example,
freedom of association type arguments. I
right.
get what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's the gray area where we kind of gotta like have a court decide, and we can assess whether we agree or disagree with that. Like, I don't think it's a freedom of speech. Like the freedom of association thing doesn't really apply to me for like businesses. So, like for example, like the gay wedding cake thing. I'm 100% like make the cake because you're a business in the United States, you benefit from the most consumer-based economy on the planet. You get an enormous amount of tax breaks for being a small business. The least you can do while you're grabbing a pile of money is make a cake for a guy in rainbow colored sweats. Like that grow up, you know. Um
See, I would have to disagree with you on that one. I don't think the baker should have to make the cake, and I'll even take it a step further. Uh, as much as a free speech social media environment benefits me, I do understand why, like Twitter before Elon wanted to moderate content, to keep the advertisers in so the service could be free and that they could
exactly. Right.
try and remain profitable. Uh, and that's consistent with, freedom of association, freedom of the content you allow, freedom to bake the cake or not bake the cake. Uh, even though uh, even though platforms devoid of moderation are better for my ideas to proliferate, I do understand it and I am sympathetic towards it.
Well, this is an interesting disagreement that we have, and unfortunately, it will have to wait for another day because we're running out of time.